if you don't know how to use it, it's of no value to you. And simply having a thing and believing because you've got it, it's enough. It's not a solution. And this is a talisman of safety.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day or night it is that you're joining us. I wish you the best of it. I'm Grant Lamontang from multitool.org, and this is EDC-TV. Joining me tonight on our discussion is longtime forum member John Kirkwood, a.k.a. Kirk13. How are you doing tonight?
Very, very good, Grant. Yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm still hesitating. John feels a little unnatural. Kirky, it seems more normal because,
just both Kirky.
We've been...
I think anybody who's been following the channel now is used to it.
We've been together 15 years. I've been calling you Kirky that whole time. It's a hard habit to break. So, unfortunately, Abe and Inky were unable to join us this evening, but that's fine because they can't read, and tonight we are going to be looking at a book. So on tonight's episode, we are going to be looking at a book written by Jim Cobb, who is let me see if I can get his title accurate here, Editor-in-Chief of Backwoods Survival Guide magazine. And his latest book is Common Sense Everyday Carry. I thought that there was some interesting points.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we really should be doing some sort of intro before we get into this, some sort of regular banter.
And I wanted to start off, I was having a little look through my toy box earlier today and came up with two. One of them is a very, very popular little knife from a very popular brand. The other one would be somewhat less known, but possibly a lot better. And it's a thing, if you've been watching the last few episodes, and if you haven't, why not? Go back in, you can get them on the channel, like and subscribe, comments, it's all good. Or, of course, drop into forums at multitool.org and join in the big conversation. But one of the things I've been picking up on is the relative value of products versus their actual utility. And one of the ones I picked up, I do actually really quite like this, is a Spyderco Ladybug.
Well, that is a fantastic model. Megan's got one of those on her keys.
Right, okay. This is probably by the fourth or the fifth Ladybug I've had over the years. And the first time around, I really couldn't get along with them. I didn't understand what they were. And I will be very honest, and I will probably get a lot of hate from some quarters on this one. But I'm not a massive fan of Spyderco as a brand.
Oh, that's it. So that's all we have for you tonight.
Okay, in fairness, let me explain that one. One of the things, for those of you who haven't joined before what I've been on, I'm not based in North America, I'm based in the UK. And the prices of Spyderco is very, very high in UK currency. Being a tight-fisted sort of person, I really do like my value for money. And one of the things don't get massively excited about exotic steels. But, by and large, I do really quite like the little ladybugs. I would love to try a man bug at some point, but budget-wise, they've now disappeared over the hill and not going to be happening for me. So the other one I bought somewhere along the line was from Spyderco's sub-brand, Byrd. And this is the little Byrd Finch. And it's not as exotic as steel, but you've got nice little FRM bolsters on it. Not bolsters, scales on it. You actually have steel bolsters inside it. And it's got a little bit more weight to it. It's got a nice little finger choil, which I really like as a feature, and some knurling on the back of the blade, which gives you a lot more sort of handling skills. And the reason why I'm comparing these two is they're very much the same type of little knife. They're little keychain knives, in effect.
Mm-hmm.
And Spyderco is a name everybody loves, apart from possibly me. And Byrd is relatively unknown by comparison. But for my money, the price difference, bear in mind, I didn't buy either of these for the list price. But in the UK now, a Ladybug, the cheapest you're going to get that is about £80, which, to give you my conversion skills, about the same price as a Victorinox Swiss chap. Whereas the little Finch, these I think are now actually discontinued, but I picked that up for about £25. And it comes back to the thing on it. I'm not disrespecting the Ladybug, but where am I picking up the extra value at another £40 or £50 in the price tag?
You make an excellent point. I don't have anything of significance to use as a counterpoint, except that I personally love Spyderco's, and I do not care for the Byrd versions. I really dislike the opening hole, the bird's eye opening hole. If you hold those up again, I don't have a bird handy to illustrate.
It's. I think they actually have as a brand name the bird's eye.
Yes, and I do not care for that. I really don't. I find that when you're rotating your thumb to open the blade, that extra little notch tends to catch a little bit on your thumb pad. And I've had a number of birds over the years. I found that the dimensions and the qualities, the fit and the finish were not quite of the same standard as, and I have both spider wrenches from, I have the Taiwanese made one and the USA made one. And I find that they are built to a better standard, and the dimensions are incremental but different on the Byrd tool. This is something I discussed years ago on the forum at forum.multitool.org. So if you really want to have some idea of what I'm talking about, feel free to check out our forum. But because of that, I've never been a big fan of the Byrd line.
Okay, I mean, that's true. I will actually agree with you on the point about the thumb holes. I have, over the years, had one or two other larger Spydercos. Certainly the round, the spider hole works very, very well. But I'm almost exactly the inverse opposite to you. I've really enjoyed the Byrds much more than I've enjoyed the Spydercos.
That's actually the benefit of having, having you on the show. Inky, Abe, and I are all big fans of Spyderco. And so it's great to have a counterpoint, especially somebody that can just justify it. I imagine a large part of why I don't like the Byrds is, well, it's the cheap version of something. This is why we have so many different options on the market. And you're absolutely right. This harkens back to the discussion we had a couple of weeks ago about the Byberry version of the Surge.
Yes.
And I said that the Byberry version of the Surge is maybe not just as good as the Surge, but for a small fraction of the price. And what you're talking about is this Byrd version is about a third of the price of the Spyderco version.
Comes back to, I think, another comment you used, which was the 90% tool is a 90% knife.
Yes. So it's interesting that thank you for pointing out my hypocrisy, that I feel that the Byberry is acceptable because it's so much cheaper, but I do not care for the Byrd for the exact same reason.
But again, it's one of the things, and I think it's going to come into the main part of our discussion tonight, is finding the right solutions for you as an individual.
Well, of course, absolutely. That's why we have such a big market, because what works for me is not going to work for you necessarily. Yeah. So. And this is, I think, why we also tend to stick with our brands. We get the big brands like Leatherman and Victorinox because, while not every model is going to appeal to you, not every Leatherman is going to fulfill your needs, I can feel confident in saying that any Leatherman tool you buy is going to be of a certain level of quality. Yes. So while it may not meet your needs, you're unlikely to be disappointed in it for what it is, even if it's not doing what you need it to do. But yeah, no, that is fascinating. I'm going to have to put some more thought into why I don't care for the Byrd models. Perhaps I'll have to get another couple of Byrds to put some more effort into this research.
It's another one. I don't have either example any longer, but there's the Spyderco UK PK and the Byrd Turn. And they basically fulfill the same niche, which is moderately sized one-hand opening knife that is UK legal and that is non-locking. And I had, actually it was the UK PK rescue knife that I traded back in the good old days from one of our members in the States for a skilly tool. And all the things you mentioned, fit and finish, were lovely. And the big problem of it was the back spring on it was too weak. And the problem was I'd end up having the blade closing on me when I was using it. Where the Turn, which was and still is less than half the price of a UK PK, possibly didn't have quite the fit and finish, but not far off, maybe 5% or less margin on that, but had a much more realistic backspring on it weak enough to allow easy one-hand opening, stiff enough and strong enough to allow safe usage. But again, I know I'm going to get abuse for this one because I know the UK PKs have a big fan club. But again, as I always say at this point, if you think I'm wrong, please feel free to send me one. I'll quite happily test it again. And if I'm wrong, I'll quite happily come back and admit to it.
This is actually one that we agree on. And I'm just going to pull it up here for the folks at home really quickly. I want you talking about this reminded me of the Lansky World Legal Knife.
Oh, dear God, that thing.
And these are my photos from my post on the forum. This is a fantastically bad knife. And the concept was that it was supposed to be legal anywhere that you went in the world because it didn't have one-handed opening. It didn't lock. It didn't this. It didn't that. And I still have this. And I pull it out every now and again. See, there's your response. Permission to say I told you so.
Yeah.
Because my review of it was not overly positive. And it was just remarkably large. Let me pull back up to this comparison with a Swiss Army knife. It was remarkably large. It was extremely bulky. It was very tactical looking for no benefit whatsoever, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And in fact, if I was a law enforcement officer and I did see that, I would think that you're up to no good. Now, whether it met the legal requirements or not, why are you carrying this big galumphing knife with a hawkbill blade when, if you're really up to no good, why wouldn't you just be carrying a Swiss Army knife for a fraction of the price and a lot of extra function?
Yeah. Yeah, that really, yeah. I think I had mine for about 2 weeks. I carried it a couple of times at work. It functioned remarkably poorly in the role. I won't say it scared the children, but yeah, it did.
When it comes to design, I feel that and I hesitate to use the word failure because somebody went to effort to design that knife, but I like the evolutionary failures just as much as, if not more than, the successes.
Oh, yeah.
It's fascinating to see things that probably seemed like a very good idea at the time, but in execution, they just sort of fell flat. And God knows we've all been there ourselves where we've gotten stuck on a problem and we've solved this to then get to this, to get to this, to get to this, until we've come full circle to have put an awful lot of effort in to still have the original problem.
Yeah.
But now compounded because of loss of time. So I understand how these things get developed, and I'm fascinated by them. I love the screw-ups. I love the failures.
It's one of the things. I mean, one of the episodes recently we were talking about SOG multi-tools. Now, I would never call the power tool a failure, but it was an evolutionary dead end.
It was a 90% home run in the early days when we first started multitool.org, and before that. You could always tell what kind of military guy you were dealing with by which multi-tool he had. If he was a grunt, he had an MP600 because that's probably what he was issued. If he was an officer, he probably had a Leatherman because, it's fancy and needs a proper, upgraded tool to show his stature. And then if he was an EOD or he was a tanker, he probably had a SOG because it was the PowerLock was just the absolute toughest tool available on the market for years. And even in this day and age, 20, 30 years on, I would still put it up against the toughest tools on the market.
Yeah. I actually bought one earlier this year. Basically, more on the principle of grabbing one while they're still available.
Well, there you go. There's our consumer advice tonight. Purchase a Byrd, even though Grant doesn't like it, and get yourself a PowerLock while you still can. But I think I completely derailed your thought there. Did you have something else that you wanted to talk about?
No, not actually. I'm not.
Going through
the
your
only
toy
thing
box.
I actually want to go back was on the Lansky World Knife.
Yes.
I thoroughly hated it. Genuine, I thoroughly hated it. Only one of the things when you do join multitool.org, you suddenly get exposed to all sorts of things you really maybe didn't already know was out there. And you try all sorts of different solutions. Generally, we tend to give them a fair shout. As Grant has said on an earlier episode, we don't do a quick 5-minute unboxing review and then call it done. We actually go out, whether you're working in construction, retail like I was in, we've had people involved in the military, law enforcement. We use stuff. And generally,
Absolutely.
you only abandon it after it has failed or has not met your expectations. And very often it's not that it's failed, it's just not met your expectations. I've only twice moved something on within a week of getting it. The Lansky World Knife was one of them. And the funny thing of it was, I cannot remember who it was I traded it with or what I traded it for, but I certainly got the better end of the deal. But the person on the other end of the trade came back to me and sort of said, look, are you really sure you want this? I don't want to get a reputation and pass it along, that equipment. No. And they actually really liked it and really enjoyed it.
To each their own.
Exactly. As you say, we were looking at it largely on the same perspective. It ticks legal boxes, but any law enforcement person is going to look at it with suspicion. It didn't fulfill, to my mind, its design requirements. But somebody else, it did work for them.
I appreciate the absurdity of it. Is it a knife I would carry and use? No. I mean, I did in my initial testing, and this is why I like to test things that I think are absurd, because I have been proven wrong on many occasions, and there will be many more occasions where I think something is, the most remarkably stupid thing I've ever encountered, and then I use it for a while, and I go, yeah, now I get it.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. Everybody go out and buy one of these right now. Yeah, exactly. Although apparently people should buy the Byrd version because it's much more affordable.
If you can find one now. If you really fancy this one,
Yes.
drop me a line. I'm sure we can negotiate a price.
I was going to make a comment about eBay prices on used Spydercos, but
I believe you.
and then John will retire.
No, I won't even do that because, it's the UK. The only thing you can get from Spyderco is either do you remember the little sort of pyramid-shaped knife holders?
Yes.
Yes, you can get those for about £60. Or do you remember the
Goodness.
pen that they done in the style of the butterfly knife?
The Spiderfly, I believe they called that.
Something like that. Those are still available in the wild. But yeah, that's as far as you'll get on eBay in the UK.
I have not seen one of those in years. If you come across one, please let me know and I'll send you some money for it.
I will keep that in mind.
For a reasonable price, if such a thing is possible. That was such a bizarre thing. And I remember when those came out and I thought to myself, what a stupid idea. But now I find myself wishing that I had it because, as I may or may not have pointed out, I really enjoy the absurd. The absurdities in the market are just fascinating to me.
Spyderco were ahead of the trend there. It basically was, what do you call them? Do you remember a couple of years ago they came out, it's like little ball bearing mounted things,
Fidget spinners?
It was a fidget toy. It was a fidget toy ahead of its time.
Absolutely. But then I'm pretty sure that qualifies for an awful lot of what we have here. I mean, how often do you spend in your day just flicking knives and trying not to get stitches from them?
I take it you've got a Gerber multiplier, some description sitting there?
That is they are upstairs. I have many of them.
Well, in that case, I will do the stand-in for you because I actually have mine handy. Let's see if I can do this without breaking my tablet.
Oh, there you go. Oh, and it's a blunt nose set too. My gosh.
This one is actually a custom build. The guys on the forum a couple of years ago sold off basically a spares packet and 3 frames and a whole bunch of plier heads, and I bought it. So not only is it a blunt plier head, oxide body, standard finish on the tools, and it is also a bladeless model.
Nice.
So that is
fantastic.
Fully custom.
I had thought at one point that I should focus my collection on MP600 variants. And then I started looking at the MP600 variants, and there's
so many.
I could spend the rest of my life chasing those and still not even come close.
I very nearly done something stupid the other night. For a change, I stopped myself. Let me put it that way. And I was looking at AliExpress. Actually, funny enough, it was a follow-up on our conversation about salt power pints. One of the adverts on AliExpress it definitely wasn't a Gerber MP600. It definitely was made with copyright infringements, but basically was the EOD model with the big C4 spike on it.
I have that. I have that exact one. And I posted about it on the forum, and I think it said something about get this model so you don't explode or something like that.
But I was kind of thinking, I've got enough spares sitting around. I've got a proper Gerber plier head sitting around. And then went, no, just no. We'll walk away from that one.
We got free copies of the Common Sense Everyday Carry book, which is the latest from Jim Cobb from Backwoods Survival magazine. Hang on, let me make sure that I'm getting that correct again. Backwoods Survival Guide magazine. So, Kirky, what are your thoughts on this book? You read it a little more recently than I have.
Yeah, it was an interesting read. There are some parts on it I thought were very, very deeply insightful. There is some parts, again, bearing in mind I'm based in the UK, that were utterly irrelevant to somebody living in the United Kingdom. There were some parts in the best traditions, so maybe and me, I would probably disagree with quite strongly. But overall, it was an interesting read. It's one of those ones that will make you sit and evaluate your own carry and evaluate what and how you carry the things that are useful to you.
I think that is a valid point. As people may or may not have heard, we both belong to the forum at multitool.org. And these are all a lot of topics that we discuss on a fairly regular basis. And I would agree completely with you when you say that there are things that you agree with and things that you don't agree with. But one of the things that I like is sort of how in the book they structured some of the ideas that we talk about. And I've got some notes here I'm going to refer to. Let's see here. The 3-layer system.
That was actually, I thought, one of the deep insights they offers.
Yeah, and for those who aren't familiar and haven't gotten around to reading this book yet, the 3-layer system that he touches on is the on-body, off-body, and vehicle. EDC. And so these are things that your on body obviously would be the things that you have in your pockets on you at any given time. The off body generally was in an EDC bag, similar to my work bag that I've showed in the past, that's not necessarily with you, but is not very far away. And then, of course, the vehicle carry is, that's pretty self-explanatory, things that you might have in your car or truck that's, not immediately handy, but that you can get to.
Right.
So I thought that was an interesting way of defining it. Certainly, we've all discussed this at great length on the forum. But to have
even in one of our previous episodes when we were talking about bug-out bags, this is something that became very much part of that conversation. And as you say, on the forum, it's something we've talked about for years and years and years, but we've never sort of put a formal sort of structure to it. And for somebody going forward, it's an interesting way of evaluating what you need and where.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the thoughts about the bug out bag was not so much that this is you're going to have the things in this bag and those are going to do you for the rest of your life through the duration of the zombie apocalypse or whatever. The idea was these get you to your next level. And so I think that when we're looking at this 3-layer system that's discussed in Common Sense Everyday Carry, is that I have the things that I need on me frequently. Those are on me at all times. And they can cover me until I can get to my bag, which can cover me until I can get to my vehicle. And then once I'm in my vehicle, well, now we have a whole number of other options. If I need a tool, I can go somewhere and get it. I can either go home and get it, or I can go to Home Depot and buy it, or I can, drive to a friend's house and borrow theirs, or whatever the case may be. So it's nice to have that broken down into an actual framework that, again, they're topics that we have covered a million times on the forum over the past 20 years, but I really like the succinct framework that's discussed in this book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the next one you're going to sort of move towards, you really like this one and the psychology around it. Talismans of safety.
Yes. Another excellent, shall we say, wording or phrase to describe things that we have been discussing for years. And the concept, well, you brought it up. Why don't you tell us what the concept is?
Okay. One of the things, going back to something we were talking about just a few moments ago, is you had, when I worked in the big retail outlet, there was people who didn't have tools or a multi-tool or pocket knife that I would quite happily lend them to. Then there was people who I would not lend them to under any circumstances whatsoever. Yes, if you're listening and thinking, does John mean me? Yes, I do. And then there was the third tier, and they possibly were the smallest percentage, but the absolute worst one. And the people who had the Swiss Army knife or had the multi-tool and didn't know how to use it. Classic examples, I'm sure we've all seen it somewhere. Somebody who doesn't understand how to close a knife safely. Somebody who is trying to crimp an electrical connection instead of using the right section of the plier head, possibly by just folding the tool up and banging it across a desktop. We've all seen things like this. Where in the book the author is going further with it is kind of going, a lot of people are buying a lot of gear. And let's be honest, there's probably never been more gear on the market than what there is at the moment.
No, definitely.
And we're probably saturated with a lot of gear. Some of it is very, very good quality. Some of it is quality to a price. And some of it is just simply tat.
It's a much nicer word than I would have used, but yes.
Yeah, but regardless of what gear you've got, if you don't know how to use it, it's of no value to you. And simply having a thing and believing because you've got it, it's enough. It's not a solution. And this is a talisman of safety. If you have a Swiss Army knife with 14,000 functions on it, yes, I do, thank you very much, and you don't know how to use any of those functions, all you're doing is carrying dead weight around. You're far better to have just a single bladed knife, even like the much maligned little ladybug. But if you know how to use it, one of the things we have on the forum, at forums@multitool.org, and I think it gets run more or less annually, is the Chuck Yeager challenge.
Yes.
For those of you who've not heard of this one of Brigadier General Yeager's books, he talked about going on a hunting trip. And the only knife he took with him was a Victorinox 65mm executive, I believe.
I think that's what it was, yeah.
This is basically, it's a slightly oversized keyring knife. And with that, he was obviously hunting with the knife, but he was using that particular knife to dress whatever game that shot. He was using it for all the campsite functions. That's not a talisman of safety. That's somebody who knows his tool, knows how to use it.
Yes.
The author, Mr. Cobb, he comes back to this in a couple of the other chapters. I think this is very important, where he talks about things like first aid as well. And his points where he touches on self-defense. And he's very, very clear in this. And I think it's very important. The gadget you have, the tool you have, is not important. The important bit is the mindset to be able to use it and having learned and acquired the skills to use it properly and safely.
I've had a situation where I gave somebody a Swiss Army knife, and a few months later, they asked me if I would sharpen it for them, which, it's not a problem. I'm happy to do that. And they gave me the knife, and the tip was quite well and truly buggered. And I said, it was a TSA seizure Spartan. I've got many of those lying around, and I hand them out to people. So it wasn't like it was an expensive knife. But I asked what happened to the tip, and apparently they had used it as a screwdriver. And I said, yeah, I can see the look on your face.
There's 2 screwdriver functions on this knife.
Yes, that is exactly my response. And perhaps I think the best definition I can think of a talisman of safety, because, their first thought was, yes, I can deal with this. I have a Swiss Army knife. Swiss Army knives are handy for this kind of thing. But I guess that this person had only ever used the blade, and so that's where their mind went. So I applaud the initial mentality of, yes, I have a Swiss Army knife. I can do this. Perhaps a little bit more experience would be necessary in a situation like that. But the other one that always gets to me on that, and this is probably, this definitely affects a lot more people, is a fire extinguisher.
Yeah, that's a really good example.
Which is not usually considered an EDC item, but it is something that we all have in our homes. And we all have fire extinguishers, but have we all checked the gauges on a fairly regular basis to see that they are still charged? And if they are, have we figured out how to use it? Because an awful lot of people still try to shoot the fog through the flames and are very unsuccessful.
Yeah, I mean, picking up on your analogy there, when I worked in the retail store, we had to have 3 types of fire extinguisher for different types of fires. The CO2 one was always the big issue, because if you hold the nozzle incorrectly, when the CO2 is released, the temperature drops very, very rapidly, and you'll essentially get yourself frozen to metal parts. Prior to my point of employment, that actually had happened once. And one of the things on it was we had refreshers every year on how the fire extinguishers worked, what we should be doing in the event of a fire. Remind us exactly where the evacuation points were, evacuation process, and so forth. Now, at this point, you might be kind of going, what's John waffling on about this time? But it does link back to one of the chapters of Mr. Cobb's book, where he is talking about first aid kits. And he is very good in pointing out the fact there's no point in having a comprehensive first aid kit if you don't know how to use it, which is, again, our talisman safety subject. But the other thing I would go back on that is if you are, again, I was never trained as a first aider, but anybody who was had to be refreshed on an annual basis.
Yes.
And the thing of it is, in the end of the day, things change, needs improve. So even if you are one of the people who out there who is first aid trained, you know yourself, you need to keep up to date on it. So one of the things on it,
absolutely,
buying the talisman of safety, the initial knowledge in itself, again, isn't enough. You have to keep the knowledge updated and relevant.
Absolutely. Also, it's good to have a refresher for those sorts of things, because I am first aid trained. I do requalify. It's every 3 years, I believe I'm required to requalify. But it's not so much that there's new techniques. It's just a reminder, a refresher of some of the details that, well, gosh, am I supposed to do, 50 chest compressions and then, 5, breaths, or is it, and you sort of forget some of those details. And admittedly, as long as you're doing the work, things should be as good as they're going to get. But it is nice to have the refresher on the techniques and the timings and the qualities of things that are considered to be acceptable, because you could potentially be holding somebody's life in your hands, and it's always good to try to get that as right as possible.
And again, it's the other thing. I was reading through some of the elements within the chapter on first aid kits, and it was also the conversation was on tourniquets. Again, it's not something I've trained on, but vague familiarity with. And when I'm saying this, it's not a criticism of the book or a fault in the chapter at all. But it's also being aware that you can do harm while trying to do right.
Yes.
The first thing, again, this will link into one of the other chapters in the book, I think, well, certainly I'd like to discuss, is in those situations, your first aid skills will be good and your first aid skills will be valuable. But the very first thing you should be doing is phoning 911 or 999 or 111 or whatever the appropriate telephone number in your location is to get in contact with the emergency services.
Absolutely. I've actually been saying for years, and many people have argued with me, that your phone is the best bit of survival kit that you can get. Admittedly, you might not always have signal. Admittedly, you might have a dead battery. There's a lot of maybes, but there's also a lot of maybe you do have a signal, and maybe you do have battery life, and maybe you can get in touch with somebody who can do a better job than you.
It's one of the things in the psychology of EDC. I'll say this more for myself than to speak for you on this one, Grant. But carrying the tools is what is to have it there in case the proper thing isn't available.
Absolutely. I'm 100%.
And first aid is no exception to that. And as you say, and then
I agree.
In this instance, the first recourse should be, can I speak to the person who actually knows professionally what they're doing and what they're talking about? Can they help me? And as you say, the telephone is an absolute, choose the word, it's a lifesaver.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But, getting back to the talismans of safety idea, is the only reason I can think of for you to carry a piece of equipment, whether it's on your person, in your bag, or in your car, or anywhere it's available. The only reason I can think of that you would carry something that you don't know how to use is that you would potentially have it available for somebody else who might know how to use it in a situation.
Yeah.
And this what always reminds me of the, do you remember the movie The Abyss?
Yes.
With Ed Harris?
Yes.
And this is a scene that will always come into my mind when we discuss EDC. They're in the bath escape and they're trying to get across, and there's a leak and water's pouring in, and they don't have enough time to get where they're going before the bath escape fills with water. And it would be a simple thing to fix, but it's behind an equipment panel. And Ed Harris says, I can't believe we're going to die because I don't have a crescent wrench. And that always got to me because, I have a Leatherman. I can help.
Yeah.
How much different would that scene have been if he had a wave or a Swiss tool? I guess definitely a Swiss tool because the Leatherman. No, we won't talk about Leathermans rusting under the ocean. That's a whole other discussion. In those situations, carry a Swiss Army knife. If you're trapped under the ocean in a bath escape with Ed Harris, make sure you have a Swiss Army knife, I guess, is the takeaway from that.
The takeaway is whatever you were talking about, have a Swiss Army knife.
And if you need to tighten a screw, use the screwdriver on the Swiss Army knife. But that, of course, gets us to another point from the book that I wanted to discuss. And that is, and I got to refer to my notes here again, you can't carry everything. And that's the critical pocket mass. Now, we talk a lot about minimalism on the forum. Guys try to get by with as few things as they can. And that's fantastic. But, one of the things that always has bothered me is, I've got my multi-tool, which has a one-handed opening blade, but then I also have my knife, which has a one-handed opening blade. And do I need to be carrying this many blades? Are there that many varieties of things that I am going to need to cut? Or am I going to be doing it significantly enough that the ergonomics of the multi-tool are not up to it? But why am I carrying both of these? These are both, not heavy. Okay, so this one's a surge clone, which means, it's a boat anchor. But,
You didn't read that one on the Amazon review?
No, but there's an awful lot of surges at the bottom of a lake thanks to Nico. But that's another story. Another good one that you'll want to search on the forum someday. Do I need multiple blades? So the amount of weight that I can free up by getting rid of, my dedicated knife because I have a multi-tool with a one-handed opening blade, which I'm going to open two-handed here because, this either saves me some weight or it means that I can carry something else in its place. And when I was younger, when I first started my career in high-risk security, I had a 28-inch waist and I had probably 30 inches of equipment crammed onto my duty belt. And it was all stuff that I was convinced that I needed. And looking back on it, I don't know that I used probably 80% of the things on there. I don't even remember all of the stuff that I had. But I totally agree with this avoiding the critical pocket mass because do you need to be carrying literally everything?
One of the things on it links back to something we were talking about on the EDC Watch episode. People who are not part of the EDC community or readiness mindset aren't impressed by what you carry. The critical mass thing, you could end up in a situation where you're carrying bits and bobs for no practical reason except to try and impress people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of folks.
The Instagram people.
Yeah. There was a trend for a while that you had to carry a pocket pry bar.
Yes.
Yep. Now, a pry bar can be a very, very useful tool. The old pocket wrench.
But not when you have less than 2 inches of leverage on it.
Correct. And that's the problem because a proper pry bar, you need the long length. Yeah. You can maybe get away with wearing a belt pouch to carry your Leatherman or your tactical folder, but carrying a 7-inch pry bar or a 12-inch pry bar kind of doesn't work. Or you end up trying to think of sort of other examples on this one. But, part of the problem is we do go through fashions as well with EDC.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
One of the interesting chapters was Mr. Cobb talks about cordage. And there was a period where we all wore paracord bracelets.
Yes. And it didn't stop there. You had paracord lanyards on everything, and your leash for your dog was paracord. And yeah, I'm sure I've got a few here as well. But yes, paracord everything was definitely another trend, a useful trend.
Yeah. It's one of the ones where a previous love interest of mine was notable for her ability of stuffing things into suitcases, far beyond the capacity of the suitcase to actually deal with it. And one of the things I did like about Mr. Cobb's book is he does give a very basic guide for tying knots. And this, again, it comes back to the talisman of safety. There's no point in having a big roll of paracord if you can't tie it securely.
If you can't tie knots, tie lots.
That would be me. Right. No, one of the things...
Yes. Somebody else on this podcast has that affliction too, John. I won't mention his name.
Oh, that's good. That makes me feel a bit better. Well, one of the things I've always would have loved to have been able to do is these cobra knots that they use for doing the bracelets. I just can't do it. It's beyond my skill set. But I did develop a little thing that works. And what I found was I can do a bracelet with these, or I could do sort of longer lanyards that you can put onto a carabiner clip. Knowing this young lady was going to be traveling and what state her suitcase was going to be in at departure, let alone arrival, said, look, here's a present for you. I know you don't get why I do all these things, but stick a couple of these, just clip it on to the handle of your shoulder bag, clip it onto your handbag, because should that suitcase go putz on arrival, you can at least use the paracord to bind it up enough to get to your hotel or to get back to your apartment. And it's where EDC can become a thing, where it goes back to one of the other phrases Mr. Cobb coins: mission drives the gear.
Absolutely.
Right? And this was a particular case. Her mission was never going to be tactical. Her mission was never going to require to have a multifunctional Leatherman. But having a couple of feet, 3 or 4 feet of paracord could end up being not necessarily a lifesaver, but a great convenience for getting around the city.
Absolutely. Yes, being able to tie up a bit of luggage is, but I'm a believer in having cordage for any number of things. And paracord is generally my go-to because it's plentiful, it's cheap, it doesn't rot, and you don't really have to worry about the strength of it.
Yeah.
So it's not pretty, and so perhaps your significant other may not like to have it around, but it is sort of one of those, it's kind of like duct tape in that it will get the job done.
Yes.
Won't do it pretty. It won't do it well, might not do it permanently, but it will get it done well enough for you to get where you're going or do what you need to do.
Yeah, exactly.
All in all, John, and we are coming close to the end. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. Is there anything that you feel that somebody should pick up this book for? Is there anything that stuck out at you? Who do you think would benefit from this book?
That is one of the things I found really challenging looking at when I was reading through it. Because, it's got chapters on all the important stuff. There's chapters on knives. But if you're already EDCing, you already have strong feelings about it. Or you visit a forum like forums of multitool.org to get the best information. Or you follow a good YouTube channel on the subject like EDC-TV. But while the information he gave was good, it was largely, I thought, redundant. Because if you're picking up a book like that, you probably already have it. You're developing what your EDC, or you're refining your EDC, rather than starting from scratch.
Right.
The chapters around safety gear, water purification, first aid, electrical devices, strangely enough, I thought was very, very pertinent and relevant. Certainly that I got quite a lot out of. As Grant will tell you, I have a tendency towards looking at smart devices and finding the nearest hammer. But they are not a part of our life. We were talking earlier about telephones. The smartphone is just not, it is the standard, and you need power supplies for that. It is something we touched about as well on the Bug Out Bag episode. But he looks into that on a good level. I thought I was actually rather impressed with that. Protective gear, I thought again was an interesting one, especially in this day and age.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
But again, with that one, that I personally would have thought starts clashing it in with your layers of EDC. Because it's one of those things you need it when you need it. And it's not one where you need to be running back to find your backpack or your car vehicle. To be fair on it, anybody who's involved with the forum would be like myself. There's bits they're going to find deeply interesting, and there's bits they're going to disagree with quite strongly. And because we're all users of the equipment, we all have our own opinions. There's not an absolute right or wrong answer. See our earlier conversation of the Lansky World Knife.
I think we were in agreement on that.
We were, but there was one person who enjoyed it. That's the one that matters, not you and I. We're just going to sit here and argue about high-end one-hand opening folders on that. You know what? It's one of those ones where there's a lovely British saying. It's a curate's egg. It's far too long for me to go into explain that one. But basically what it means is parts of it are very, very good. And from that point of view, anybody who is already involved in a forum or is involved in a job role where they do have an EDC will get something out of it. There is something of value in it for all of us.
Okay.
Whether I would say it's the be-all and end-all, that's a different story. I've been on multitool.org for 15-odd years and been involved in countless discussions and read countless more. And we still haven't reached the be-all and end-all.
I was going to say the be-all and end-all is forum.multitool.org, but you're right. We have not reached that, but we are definitely getting there. I also enjoyed the book. As I said, I like that it sort of defined a lot of the indefinable things that we've been talking about for years. You know, it created that, or didn't create, but it illustrated that framework that I find really quite handy. But I don't know who a book like this is marketed towards.
No.
And that is, you know, if you decide that you want to get into kayaking, you buy a book or a guide, or you go online and you find a guide on, you know, well, what kind of kayak should I buy? What kind of paddle should I buy? What kind of life jacket should I buy? How am I going to carry this? What are the other associated costs? What are this? What are that? And you decide that you're going to get into kayaking, and that's, you know, what you do. And it doesn't matter what the topic is. It could be hockey. It could be baseball. It could be motorcycle racing. It could be flower arranging, and you buy a book. But I don't know that somebody wakes up one morning and says, I'm going to get into EDC.
Yes.
What should I know?
Yeah.
I think what happens is somebody says to themselves, I was at work yesterday and I saw John, and he had a Swiss Army knife, and he was able to open the mail, tighten a screw, pop a cork out of a bottle of wine, scale a fish, whatever. And I think that's really handy. And you know what? I think I would like to get a Swiss Army knife. And so then that person goes out and gets a Swiss Army knife. And then they think to themselves, well, it's rather inconvenient for me to constantly have to, go and pull this out. So maybe I'm going to get a one-handed opening knife. And then you think, okay, well, now I've got a one-handed opening knife. Great. Yesterday I really needed a set of pliers. Great. So now I'm going to go out and get myself a multi-tool, and I think that it's incremental, and I don't know how many people sit there and say, I need an EDC setup.
Yeah. I mean,
unless of course you're already in this world.
Yeah. The thing of it is, where if you're not a member of the forum, come on over and you sort of find there's a couple of major threads that run through things. We have collectors, and I love our collectors. They, you're talking earlier about the Gerber MP series. I think it's one of your fellow countrymen, and he has the most amazing collection of multi-tools. And if he doesn't have every variation of the MP Gerbers, I don't know. But I'm never going to see them all. But it gives me a place to go and see it. We have people who use tools, which we've discussed many, many times.
Yes.
Collecting multi-tools or collecting knives is a wonderful hobby. EDC isn't a hobby. EDC is something you actively do as a part of your life or your lifestyle. And I think that's where there is possibly an issue with the book. Most people who have EDC as part of their lifestyle will know large chunks of what's already covered in the book. There will be bits that they're not familiar with. Or there'll be philosophies around it. The talisman of safety is a thing, or the layers of EDC. And you might refine what you're already doing. But as Grant has said a number of times over, if you remember the forum, we've not put an end to it, but we've been discussing it for years. Where the book's good is it defines concepts. But who it's aimed at, I'm not certain. One of the things I realized, I don't know if you would have had it in Canada. When I was a kid, SAS Survival Handbook by Lofty Wiseman came out, and we were fortunate we had a copy of it in the local library. And there is so much of it was utterly and completely irrelevant to me. It's great to know what the SAS survival techniques for being in a, Arabian desert are. But when you're living in a small dorp in South Africa, they're not relevant. When you're living a town on the Northern Ireland Riviera, you don't really know how to get water out of a cactus.
Right.
But as a
Absolutely.
But as a 13-year-old, you were sitting and read it avidly.
And I think that 13-year-old would probably find this kind of a book fascinating. Just I want to get back to something that you were mentioning there. And I think that this is actually a whole other episode. But you mentioned, the EDC lifestyle. And you're absolutely right, because we have sort of developed this into its own little subculture over the years. But the reality is everybody's into EDC.
Yeah.
Now, maybe their EDC is not an assisted opening Kershaw, but literally everybody is into EDC. When you leave your house, you bring your wallet, you bring your keys, you make sure that you've got your glasses, you've got your phone, you've got a phone charger,
you got your wristwatch.
You've got your watch. So if you have a phone or a watch or glasses or a wallet or a purse, you are into the EDC lifestyle. And then it's just simply a matter of the details of what types of things that you EDC. And I think that's an important distinction to make, because, we think about it as, I've got my camo neckerchief and I've, got my one-handed opening knife and I've got my multi-tool and I've got my flashlight. And these are EDC items in that a lot of people do carry these every day, but EDC is everyday carry. And so it's whatever things that you have with you when you leave the house. Yeah. Even though the common sort of, the industry is built up around pocket knives and multi-tools and flashlights and things like that. The reality is everybody is into, unless you leave your house with something different every day. You don't have keys. You don't have a wallet. You don't have identification. You don't have a watch. Then you can say, I'm not part of the EDC lifestyle. Yeah. But realistically, I'm going to guess that is very, very few people out there.
Well, it's one of those things on it. There's some things in the introduction. Sir Cobb talks about Otzi the Iceman.
Right.
For those of you who are not familiar, this bird chap was discovered somewhere up in the Swiss Alps, I suppose about 30 years ago now. Originally thought he was a hiker or mountaineer who got lost and unfortunately lost his life. And it turned out he actually dates back to the early Bronze Age. And this chap had his own EDC. He had a bronze knife. He had a flint knife. He had a little kit for repairing the edge of the flint knife. EDC isn't anything new.
No, God, no.
It's not something that suddenly dropped out of the gaming consoles did 30 or 40 years ago. It's something we all deal with. My Kirkwood grandfather, may rest in peace, I was over home and he was just doing some household tasks, didn't have a screwdriver to hand. Normal thing, I only had the one Swiss Army knife at the time. It's my much beloved and missed tinker. I sort of pulled it out, popped out the back spring tinker, went, there you go, there's a screwdriver. He quite happily tightened up the screws, quite impressed with his grandson having this little knife. He then put his hand into his pocket and pulled out his pocket knife. It was one of these just, very basic, I don't want to say it was a canoe, it wasn't a canoe, but we'll take that as a style for the sake of the conversation. It was something that he had owned for I don't know how many years because the blades were sharpened down to that beautiful crescent shape. It wasn't the 50-mile-an-hour knife the Grant's talked about before. This is one that had been loved and...
It was a 50-year knife.
Yeah, had been loved and cared for and sharpened religiously. And that had been his EDC when he'd worked in the shipyard, where he'd worked in the aircraft. It had been his EDC around the house, doing all sorts of tasks. To me, that's a true EDC. That's not there to impress anybody. That's something there that is used.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, John, we're unfortunately out of time yet again. I actually feel bad for the folks at home on this one because I think we've been recording for an hour and 18 minutes now. And unfortunately, we rarely go more than 45 minutes in the final edit. There is going to be an awful lot of, I believe, very good material left on the cutting room floor for this one. But anyways, regardless, we are coming to the end of our show. And as usual, do you have any Any final thoughts, either on the Common Sense EDC Carry book or just in EDC in general, or a dirty limerick or anything that you would like to share?
I will do the classic YouTube thing. Folks, if you've enjoyed this, remember, like, comment, subscribe. If you've really liked that and you've done all three of those and you're not already a member of the forum, come over and see us at forums@multitool.org. Yeah, if I've got to take one takeaway from having got to read this book, it's not something that would have come into the UK market. There are chapters in it that just really aren't relevant to where I live, possibly in other areas. But there's a lot of good stuff in it. If you see it, pick it up, have a read through it. I don't think you'll necessarily regret it. But there's stuff you will want to discuss afterwards. Leave something in the comments with us. Come and see us at the forum. We'll be more than happy to talk about it. And there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other people who will be happy to join in the conversation with you.
Absolutely. That is excellent advice, John. And thank you for sharing that. Once again, thank you for being here with us tonight. It's always great to have you. You're kind of becoming a bit of a series regular now, and that's fantastic. What can I say? John hit the nail on the head. Make sure that you like and comment and share, and definitely come and see us at forum.multitool.org. Well, thank you all, everybody, for joining us, and thank you for being here again, John. It's always a pleasure, and I hope everybody has a great week. We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Cheerio.